Good afternoon. Welcome to the Halcyon podcast. I'm your host, Lorne Risley. On this episode, let's touch on a few different topics leading up to the weekend. A couple of personal things as well I kind of want to talk about because I haven't made a weekly show in a little while. Podcast recently been focusing more on sports and things of that nature. But let's get the sporting elements out of the way first. Let's get the biggie, the one that probably fewest people actually care about. The NFL is hosting the Super Bowl this weekend, and I shall be watching it live and in color. It's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles versus the New England Patriots. I'm predicting a Patriots win, but fortunately for my friend, we'll be supporting the Philadelphia Eagles because we don't like them Patriots. However, the story of the game going into it is clearly whether or not Tom Brady is recovered from his injuries, whether or not the Patriots defensive line can provide him adequate cover and set up for the attack. I think the biggest thing going into this game as well, aside from Brady, is, most teams do capitulate in these knockout stages. I think you've seen it year after year in the Super Bowl where teams who are probably better prepared going into the game just for whatever reason cannot cope with the experience. I think the Patriots just know that they can rally in the second half of the game, especially in the latter stages of the third and fourth quarter. So they always know they've got at least 2 touchdowns in their back pocket then. So the goal for many teams is to score as many points in the first half as they possibly can and then try their best to stop that rally in the second half. I think as well, Jay Ajayi, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. He has to have a big game for the Eagles, at least that's what Sky Sports are talking about. I have to be brutally honest, this game is probably the first in a long time, where I know very little knowledge. I have very little knowledge about the game going in. My knowledge prior to this season was the Philadelphia Eagles weren't exactly a great team, but now they're staring at championship glory through the prism of just one more game, one more push, and they are champions of the world. But the only reason I know about J.A.J. is because he former Miami Dolphin, who, from what I understand, is kind of a surprising trade at the beginning of the season, which, again, my lack of knowledge in the NFL this season betrays me, unfortunately. But I'm looking forward to a really good game. It should be pretty intense. Interested to hear the thoughts of those who might be watching or listening to the Super Bowl. Those of you in America, for instance, or the American football-loving fans here in Britain. It's not so much a prevalent sport throughout Europe, so I don't know if there's necessarily anyone out there who's going to be paying attention to it there, but it promises to be a great game. I might do a breakdown afterwards because while I don't know the ins and outs of the season itself, pretty decent knowledge of American football as a whole in terms of the sport, penalties, points, plays, and things like that. So it promises to be a good game, and hopefully I can add some insight and analysis once the game is over. Moving on, let's talk about football. Let's talk about Arsenal. Let's talk about a 5-1 drumming of Everton. Oh my days! Did anyone else see that game? It was beautiful. It was magnificent. Pause for thought, though. There are so many instances where our defensive ineptitudes could cost us against better opposition. Specifically, in the second half, I think it was even the build-up to the goal. No, actually, I'm telling if it was off the left-hand flank. Basically, just playing out of the back. I think a lot of I don't read a lot of credence into. I don't read a lot into pundits who talk often about the ideas that they want to peddle to people en masse. So the narrative this season was, Arsenal are defensively frail, they need a no-nonsense defender, and da-da-da-da. That's fine. I would argue, though, that defensive players, we've got plenty of them, and good ones at that. It's just tactically we are pretty inept. For some reason, I don't really understand why when we were caught Theo Walcott was on, and I'd like to think he missed on purpose. I'd like to think he pulled the trigger a little bit later than he possibly could have done to let Mustafi get back for that diving leg that saved the ball going over the crossbar. But that was a terrible piece of defending, an absolutely inexcusable piece of defending, having two people effectively back at the halfway line, someone with Walcott's pace letting him through on target. But I think reorganisation, just think of the back four as its own separate unit for a minute. Organise them accordingly. I get that Bellerin and Monreal provide a lot of that support, but when you don't play three centre-backs at the back and allow the wing-backs to then press onwards, you're going to have that problem, especially Mustafi and Koscielny aren't exactly what you would call pacey defenders. But nevertheless, it was a great game. Aubameyang's goal, I think we can all agree, was offside, but who cares? It's not called, so who gives a shit? Get VAR in and then we'll talk. Mkhitaryan had an absolutely staggering game, brilliant game. Rambo as well. Rambo was on the end of a couple of good efforts. His goal was a deflected goal, so that's why I think it's people are saying it's unfair that he doesn't get the plaudits from that game because he scored a hat-trick. But to be perfectly honest, his finishing was excellent. I'll give him that. But in terms of, I genuinely believe Mkhitaryan should have been the man of the match, even though he created 3 assists, didn't score 3 goals. But I think it's a genuinely exciting forward line now, and knowing that you've got Lacazette on the bench, who I still think is quality. I genuinely do. I don't think that he necessarily won't see a game every now and then. I think that the rotation element has to come into play at some point, because I think for too long Arsenal haven't really had what I would call decent rotation. But nevertheless, it was a great game of football. Mkhitaryan's debut, his home debut, Premier League debut, I should say. Aubameyang's debut, excellent. Ozil playing like he's got some passion to him again. It's an optimistic time for Arsenal, it really is. In terms of other stories going around football at the moment, you've got the Pep Guardiola situation with his, some would call, slightly petulant move to only take 6 substitutes with him to the game against Burnley. You could debate whether or not that's cost him or not, but ultimately, you can't win them all, and Manchester City have all but won the Premier League title. I'm of the firm belief, though, that people are spinning a narrative again of Manchester City building into this dynasty, this unbeatable, unfathomable goal-scoring juggernaut that can never be stopped, nay, slain by any other football team. Not so much. Teams go through cycles. You never know what's around the corner in terms of a player's personal life or troubles at the club that could lead to issues on the pitch. You just never know. And Pep Guardiola in particular is a person who I dare say will be the architect of his own downfall at some point. And what I mean by that is that next season, I believe we will see some telling signs depending on what the spend is and depending on who they bring in versus who they already have, who they're going to be shipping out. Because I genuinely think that Guardiola is too intense. He's got something of the Mourinho about him in the sense that there's a reason why he can't stay at a club for more than 3 years. The intensity is just too much. Yes, you will get bursts of utter and sheer brilliance, but then there will be periods where things aren't clicking, and he will demand even more at that point, rather than maybe simmering down, rebuilding, reassessing where he's coming from. No, we must press forward! And that's fair enough. But I believe that intensity will also be his downfall. So watch this space. I'm predicting that next season City won't run away with it. In fact, they might not even win. United will look to reinforce in the summer now that Mourinho has re-signed. Liverpool are starting to look tasty, especially when they can start looking to reinvest their Coutinho money. Spurs, I don't like saying this, but Spurs, if they can retain the services of their key men and again reinforce with a view to kind of preempting when they move into their stadium, they will start to look tasty. If Conte leaves, which is again up in the air, it depends on what happens at the end of the season in terms of position and assurances that are made in the transfer window. There's talk of Luis Enrique coming in for Conte, which you could definitely see. There's certainly no doubt about that. But in terms of City having this sort of broad dominance over English football, I doubt it very much. A lot of things can change in a couple of games, 2-3 games. So teams can go from crisis to not to back, and football's far too fickle for it to be, okay, well that's it, I guess City are the best team ever and we should all give up now. Far from it. In other news, let's talk about WWE, the Royal Rumble outcome, and the implications for Wrestlemania. Less about the Rumble, more about Mania. So what do I want to see? Well, let's think about Ronda Rousey for a second, because that's the big takeaway from the main event. It's difficult to say at the moment. I mean, you could go down the Asuka route, the undefeated WWE superstar versus the legit tough MMA fighter turned WWE superstar. I think the word is that she's now a contracted full-time performer. So I don't know whether or not they're planning on putting her on some kind of run leading up to the WrestleMania, or if it's probably more likely what I would suggest, that she'll do promos and she'll make appearances, and she will be an individual who people will look to at these events as some kind of centerpiece and some kind of a draw for the event only, but no actual wrestling will take place until Mania at the earliest. And even then it might be a tag team. You can't put it past them. If they genuinely think that she's not quite ready, it might be the team thing, the 4 horsewomen against Ronda Rousey and her team effectively. I know that's not what they're called, but let's all be honest with ourselves. That would be the main selling point. Or they could just set it up with a tag team. It depends. I mean, now with Paige being injured and having to retire effectively, but it'll give that time. You never know. Who knows? A few other things as well. Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens look like they're gearing up for a feud towards WrestleMania, which will be a freaking excellent match, a magnificent match, a storytelling bonanza. Their last feud ended in a great match. 2 haluva kicks with Sami Zayn picking up the win, and then they separate and they go their separate ways. They come back, they become friends, they start to fracture, and they go on their road again. It's a story you could watch over and over because of the chemistry that they have, the wrestling ability they possess. It's great, and I'm really looking forward to that. Interesting to see if, probably not, because I'm maybe thinking too deeply in this, and maybe I'm not as in tune to the way storytelling should be done. But interesting whether or not Jericho makes a return. Moving on, Brock Lesnar, it's kind of cut and dried. Definitely Roman Reigns. The question really is, what's Strowman doing now that he's been built as a monster who can throw trucks around and yet takes a bump through a table and is incapacitated for a few minutes. Didn't take the pin loss at the Royal Rumble, which is fair enough, but it still doesn't really answer the question of what he's doing for Mania. There's some people who are talking about Triple H. There's others who are thinking something along the lines with Kane potentially, but who knows? It will become more prevalent as the weeks unfold. But Mania is looking interesting, at least. I think, though, I'm not especially, because you've got the Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar thing going on, and if it had been built properly, if the Shield had remained together, if he hadn't had a few injuries, if he hadn't had a couple of very, what I would deem convoluted storylines, and the still pushing of the goddamn babyface look, his Cena promos from a while back now, I think still did more harm than good. I think they illustrated the difference between a performer who's comfortable in his position and understands what he can get away with and what he can't, versus someone who has to ask for permission to do things. It's just still not looking good. But that's wrestling at the moment. It's a shame. I think the AJ Styles Nakamura match will be absolutely insane for the title. That'll be interesting to see who they go. I mean, if Nakamura wins the WWE title over Styles, I mean, that could be a feud going into Mania, or that could be a feud coming out of Mania all the way to the next. That would be freaking amazing, just seeing those two. Again, I bring it back. Let Nakamura build a faction. Let AJ Styles rebuild Bullet Club and let Balor somehow get in on that, and maybe that becomes a minor feud or a semi-feud that builds in. There's so many things you could do with just the Japanese base guys, but WWE will probably drop the ball between now and then anyway, so it's wishful thinking, but nevertheless we'll have to see. I think as well they're talking about Kurt Angle maybe wrestling at Mania, perhaps Triple H, but again, it depends on what Triple H feels like, I guess. So I think that concludes the wrestling segment. Let's talk about other stuff. I'm going to be careful about what I talk about here because things are up in the air at the moment on my end. Halcyon. Let's talk about Halcyon. That's nice and safe. As far as the show is concerned, a lot of people have kind of reached out to me recently with regards to coming back having had a 2-month stint. I kind of feel like a wrestler who's had like a stint away. It's a nice thing when people are like, wow, you're back, like, oh my god, we thought you were dead or something. It's like, is this what it feels like? I don't feel like I've gone anywhere. I feel like I've just taken a break, and it just so happens that I'm doing videos again, and and it's like, no, I'm back. Whoa, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm back, man. But I decided not to, because sometimes when people do have an extended period, they come back, they do a video, they're like, oh, okay, so here's what I've been doing, here's what's going on. And I'm like, do you know what? It feels obtuse, it feels self-indulgent. So I've done a couple of those videos in the past. I think I did a 100th video, a thank you video or two, and then I did an update video after I got back from Australia, I think. But it is what it is. I'm back producing content. What more can I say? I'm going to be making more top 5s, more Halcyon Razor reviews, more Halcyons, more more Blinks, more podcasts, all that good jazz, all this good stuff. I'm going to try and at least churn out one video a week and one podcast a week. It gives me a chance to film on a day when my housemates aren't here, so I'm not disturbing them too much. It gives me a chance to have a couple of days to edit. It usually only takes about a day to edit everything together. One of these days, I think I'll probably will make a video dedicated to just how I go about making videos for YouTube, just in case if anyone else is curious, because I do get the question a lot in terms of, oh, okay, well, how do you do this? And what do I have to do to get that? And I think my techniques, though, aren't necessarily the most popular, and I don't think they necessarily translate to the best format. I think people who do YouTube these days who just have a very good quality microphone and have a reasonably pretty room in the background and can make themselves up and have decent lighting, they do okay. In fact, they do much better than me. You look at other content creators, like, in fact, take the examples of some of the other content creators that I plug from time to time. Crow, my boy Crow, he's just gameplay footage and voiceover, and that's what he does to get over with his audience, and that works for him. You've got again, similar, Defunct Games, Cyril, my boy, he, again, voiceover gameplay, albeit slightly differently. It's a heavily edited package. Every sentence or point or paragraph typically changes shot to make sure that the viewers, sort of tracking what's going on, so to speak, and obviously adds annotations and things like that, which, again, that works for him. I think, the difference between me and some content creators in my bracket, so we're talking, the smaller YouTube channels, I don't mind trying to present this as a much bigger thing than it really is. I'll be perfectly honest, okay? These podcasts, my show, they're very easy to produce. If I actually had a space dedicated to making videos, I genuinely think I could do a video a day. I genuinely think that. To film anything takes about an hour. In fact, I've got a bit of time here. Let's just run through this real quick. So, if anyone is ever curious as to how a show of Halcyon comes about, usually I'm pretty blessed. I don't have to make videos for a time frame. I don't have to make videos to fit in with some kind of preconceived genre or notion, but that also has the double-edged sword of meaning that people don't necessarily know what they're going to get from my show. So it means people can't necessarily commit in the same way another show. Again, I would take Defunct Games as the example. Gaming, solid, same sort of format every single time, with maybe just tweaks in terms of the format of the show, i.e. is it a top 5, is it a review, is it a look back, yada yada yada. With my show, I tend to do what I want. I will make what I want. If I fancy doing a top 5s list, I'll do a top 5s list. If I feel like doing a very quick review that's unscripted and maybe joshes around and misses a few points and maybe is quite lazy in terms of its approach, hell, I'll do that. If I feel like doing a Halcyon where I've scripted the hell out of it and I've researched everything and I've played the game or watched the movie extensively to try and find all the nuances and the different perspectives on things, I'll do a Halcyon. If I want to do a weekly show where I feel like taking a serious look at the news, I'll do that. If I want to do a weekly show where I'm making jokes and trying to lampoon things and provoke a response from my audience, then I'll do that. And that's why I love making YouTube videos. And I think this is difficult to eloquate to people who don't understand, or rather who don't have an outlet that they're ultimately looking to put forward to people and be successful. I use YouTube as a way of expressing myself in the purest sense of the word. I do what I want. And I feel like that sometimes does hurt my channel in terms of people tuning in and not exactly knowing what they're going to get, because I think people by nature, I'll choose my words carefully here. I think people, they are quite lazy when it comes to what they want to watch from each thing. They have one person for one thing, another person for another thing. They don't really go to people for variety. So it's the reason why I do get frustrated as a creator sometimes when I have to explain the difference between the shows. They're like, oh, Halcyon, so what do you do? And I go, well, it's not quite as simple as that. I do a lot of things. I make different videos. Occasionally I want to do just a minute comedy video. Other times I want to do reviews. Other times I want to do important personal op-ed pieces. I want to talk about serious issues. I want to talk about myself, because my channel is a reflection of me. And even going so far as to give them different names, different color schemes, releasing them with different intervals, so to say one show is going to be longer than another, and saying, look, this is the reason why, people still don't seem to be grasping it. And maybe it's because I think too highly of a hypothetical audience that doesn't exist. I don't know. I'd like to give my audience more credit and say to people, no, I know my audience, and they're like me. They tend to be more intellectual. They tend to be more thoughtful. They tend to look on the deeper side of things. They tend to be quite progressive in some areas, but nostalgic in others. And I think that I don't pander to a mass audience. I don't think I'd ever really want to. I think if I ever got the kind of audience that doesn't really think about why they like what they like and just enjoys it for what it is, brother, I wouldn't want to pander to that kind of audience anyway. So the way I make my videos is structured basically from what I want to make. If I want to film 3 blinks and edit them over the course of a couple of weeks, then I can do that, because then that means I can get set up once, film, which, by the way, for those of you who wonder about setting up a green screen or whatever, it's the easiest thing in the world. The pain in the ass thing is getting the lighting right. And that might sound like a tricky production term, but the amount of times when you're editing a video and your heart sinks when you film something and you know it's good, and you're like, yeah, I've filmed this and it's really, it's brilliant, it's excellent. And then you realise when you're editing it, oh, the lighting's off. There's a chunk of light, there's a shadow in the corner. The way that it's been lit, the green is too similar, or it's too pale and blends into other colours, and you get that sort of... a good example of this, in fact, I'm going to point this out because I watch for this on other people's videos all the time now. It's such a horror. The recent video I released, I think it was on Knights of the Old Republic 2, my wrestling belt prop that I use sometimes for, again, humorous purposes. It has some reflective quality to the leather, and it reflects the green, and so the chroma key picks it up and erases it. And you're going to see that in a couple of episodes of Blink coming up, because I'm reviewing Xbox games, and of course, what colour do the Xbox cases come in? They come in green. So what are you supposed to do? Do you just take the case apart and just have the disc in your hand, or do you take the cover out and show that? I don't know. I've got to figure that out. I didn't think about that when I was filming, but it's just one of those unique problems, and it's one of the things that as a content creator I love, because they become challenges. They become things you need to be wary of when you're editing, or when you're filming, or when you're setting up, because these things can make or break the quality of a video. I hate seeing things in my videos that I go, that looks terrible. That's a silly mistake. I've missed this, or whatever. In fact, in a recent video, I thought I'd made a mistake. In fact, I think it was in Knights of the Old Republic where I'd left an outtake in. I didn't think I'd left it in on purpose. I thought, oh crap, I didn't edit that out. I remembered that it was something that I thought was funny at the time. I thought it was funny that I'd set up filming, spent all that time getting set up, ready to go, hat on, shirt on, all the rest of it, and then I'd started talking and completely forgotten what I was going to talk about. Just completely forgot. Because again, the different show formats, blinks, just so people know, I don't script those. I literally pick up the thing, having played it, watched it, whatever, and I go, right, I'm going to talk about this for 5-10 minutes. What do I want to talk about? I don't know. Let's just roll the dice and see what happens. It's a bit like the podcast. The podcasts come much more organically than they do from the Halcyons. The Halcyons are much more heavily scripted. The same with the Razor reviews. Same with the top fives to a degree. But I like that. I like that they have a variety of different formats, different layouts, different scripting styles, different presenting styles. Because I think in years to come, if I continue to pursue this, and if the YouTube bubble doesn't burst and they don't kick content creators like me off the site, or if there's somewhere for me to post my videos, then I'd always love to be able to even just send it out to people and say, look, you know, you host the show in this style. Let me edit. I'll take care of the editing. I'll take care of the production, the pre-production, the post-production, all the rest of that jazz. Because I genuinely think that the future of my channel isn't necessarily me as a presenter. I think it's one of two things. Either it's me as a personality on someone else's channel, or it's me as a producer with someone else lending their personality to my channel. Which actually brings me on to one final point, which I'll mention in a minute, but just to finish off the original point of this tangent. So in terms of making the video, you'd spend 10-20 minutes setting up, making sure the lighting is correct. You set up your lights, you set up your camera stand, you set up your green screen, you set up your camera, you make sure that your clothing isn't, you know, going to get picked up in the chroma key. You say what you need to say, you do retakes. Sometimes you might stutter on a line, you might, you know, fudge a line, you might say something that you think, actually that's not very good, you'll do another take, and then you'll stop and you'll film. Sorry, then you'll film, then you'll stop. Then you get it onto the PC. That's when you clean up the audio, that's when you clean up the visuals, that's when you edit out the green screen itself, that's when you set out the layout of your show, i.e. what backgrounds do you want, what music do you want, what sound effects do you want, how long do you want it to be, and you go from there. You edit out the swear words in my case, because I like to be as you know, as unilateral as I can without having to sacrifice not being able to swear at all. Add in jokes, add in cutaways, segues, things like that, because I find that my comedy comes from observing myself and trying to make fun of what I'm trying to say, or then the subject matter. I'm not the greatest at thinking of jokes off the top of my head to a camera. I'm much better bouncing off somebody, which is why, again, I feel that my stance as a personality will come out one day in a different kind of format. And then you render the thing, can take a couple of hours. I think at the longest, on the old school PCs, and the old school rendering software, I've got to be honest with you, I think the longest thing I ever rendered was Mass Effect. My Mass Effect review, which has just gone over 1,000 views. And the reason being is I rendered it once, and then I had to re-render it 2 more times. And the reason for that is because the software I was using at the time was limited. You could only have 1 layer of graphics. There was no way of having multiple graphics on the screen at once. So you had to render it once with what you wanted as your flat back layer in front of the camera. To try and make it sound like sense, whatever you filmed would be in the background. So that includes me. Whatever you wanted in front of that, you would have to then layer. So if I wanted gameplay footage playing while I was talking, that's the first layer. If I want a graphic over the gameplay to make it look cool or to frame it, that goes over that. If I want my name in the corner, graphics come in and out, that all goes in after the fact. And then you have your cutaways and your segues. What I didn't realise is because you re-render it, that program had also the double edge of it reduced the quality of the freeze frames. It basically lowered the frame rate of the video, so it made me look like every other frame was missing out of the video, and it looks terrible. And I go back and I look at that video and I go, that is such a cock up. But it's part of the learning process, making videos. And like I've just said with the chroma key, it's an issue I still battle. It's something that slips my mind occasionally. But that's part of making videos, and it's how you get better. It's how you make the show look better and sound better and feel better, more professional. And that's why I think a lot of people, when they watch my videos, they're quite surprised about the level of production, because they think, well, you know, that this is a pretty decently put together video. It's not the best in terms of presentation style or outright look, but I'd argue it's not the worst thing on YouTube. I think the merit of putting a bit of effort into your videos like that is much better than just sitting in front of a camera and saying something generic that you know everyone's going to like. I think you need to take a controversial step sometimes. You need to show that you've actually thought enough about what you're about to say to put effort into editing the thing together. But hey, maybe that's just me. That brings me on to my final point. I might be appearing on another channel soon. It's not, by far, nothing confirmed. Absolutely nothing. And for those of you who are even remotely interested in seeing me on another channel, it's on a much larger platform. It's a pilot for now. I'm going to research the idea and see how I can fit into it and whether or not I can deliver. It's not all too dissimilar to when I was on Cinematic Venom. and that channel, and I was basically producing my own content but putting it on their channel. I just don't think that worked, because I don't produce content on a regular enough basis, and I don't produce the kind of content I think that his audience would have wanted to see, which is why ultimately I was not a success on that channel, which is why ultimately I left, because going into the ins and outs, that I went into that in a podcast about a year ago now. But it's just this time, if I do undertake this, it'll be one of those things where I'll need to understand the audience, understand the demographic, understand what the creator in question wants from me as a content creator, and trying to take it from there. So we'll see. I mean, don't worry. Like I've mentioned at the beginning of this video, Halcyon isn't going anywhere. I was contemplating quitting, taking it down, and doing one last video or whatever. But to be honest, if I ever get in a rut like I was in before, I will just take a break, come back, do some more, go from there. So don't worry. For those of you who enjoy my videos, and I appreciate every single one of you that do, it's one of those things where, sometimes in life, you just got to take a break. That's all. You don't need to go away. You just need to say, I'm going for a drink. That's all. Not goodbye, not see you later. I'm going for a drink. I'll see you at the after party. So on that note, I'm going to bring this podcast to a close. So thank you very much for listening, those of you who have. Please, let's go through our normal spiel. Please check out some of the other content creators in the description below. Also, check out some of the other content I've produced recently. I'd really appreciate if you could do so. Not really a hard and fast rule, but I'm hoping to produce at least one podcast a week to go in tandem with a video per week. Again, I can't promise what kind of video it's going to be. It's more than likely going to be a blink or a top 5 for the next couple of weeks. And then going further, it'll be more Razor reviews, and then potentially a Halcyon and a weekly show down the line. So we'll see. Anywho, thanks very much again for listening. To my work colleagues who might have been listening to this podcast for whatever reason, if you've made it to the end, honestly, you need to reevaluate your lives. Sorry to have to break this to you, but you really should have better things to do than listen to some punk on the internet ramble incoherently for half an hour. But I love you anyway for listening. So everyone, take care of yourselves. Please check out some of the other content creators below. Let's go Philadelphia Eagles. Let's go the Gunners. Let's go the Yep Movement. And as always, I hope to hear and see you guys on the next episode of the Halcyon podcast. Take care.